so we're on Parshas Naso. Parshas Naso is the longest parsha in the Torah. And I always used to feel bad for the bar mitzvah boys who had this parsha until I read it. And I found out that it's repetitive. 12 times you say the same thing, pretty much, except the names change. And we'll see that when we get into it. So while it is the longest parsha, it maybe is a little bit easier for the bar mitzvah boys. So Naso begins where Hashem says to Moshe, Naso es rosh b'nei Gershon gamim. You should, literally it says, raise up the head of the children of Gershon. Right? In other words, we're going to count the families of the Levium now, of the Levites, which we didn't do together with the others. We spoke about that before. And the reason it says to lift up the head, it literally means to count, right? But it shows us a specific, some of the commentaries say that it shows us that you're not just counting, but they're making a point, and it's a similar point to what we said last week, which is that in general we don't count Jews, because Jews, when you count a person, you are making them finite. You're saying, you're 210 pounds, you're 140 pounds, you're 5'8", you're number 1, number 2, number 3. And really people are not at all what they're described as. People are infinite. You can be anything you want to be. You can change, you can do things, you can make yourself look different, you can act different, you can improve yourself, you can do all kinds of things. So the idea of lifting up the head of someone is sort of counteracting the idea of counting. On the one hand, you have to count, we need to know how many people there are. Right? On the other hand, we also have to make sure that people realize that they're not just a number. So you use the expression if you lift them up. Meaning you don't just say, this is what you are, I'm going to raise you up. You're an extraordinary person, even though I have to count you. Right? And it goes from this first family of B'nai Gershon to the B'nai Merari, which is this next paragraph on the page. So it speaks about the different families of Levi. Right? In other words, these are the next generation. And then it goes on how Moshe and Aaron counted them, and what happens with each one of the people, and how they're counted by the two of them.
I see this time they count from 30 years up.
Yeah.
Unlike the other that
was from a month, 30 days.
20.
Well, this is not 30 years. This should be 30. Oh yeah, 30 years to 50. Right. So you count them. Right, to form the work in the temple of meeting. It's because the first time you're counting people, right? You're counting individuals. And when it comes to people, they counted them at 20, which is the age that you become communal. You become responsible to the community. A 20-year-old now has a responsibility to the group, not just to themselves, which they get at 13. But the reason we had a difference with Levi, they weren't counted then because they become responsible to the community at 30 days old, which really means that they at birth. Because 30 days is a number that we use, that if a baby is born and lives 30 days, we now have reason to believe the baby will continue to live. And in other words, if a baby was going to die with birth defects, they would die within 30 days. So if a baby lives 30 days, then we have reason to believe they'll continue. So they'd say the children of Levi were counted for the community as of 30 days, which means from the time they're born. And that's basically because they were dedicated to the temple. So their life, right, was so dedicated to the Jewish people. It's from the moment they're born they're dedicated, not just when they got older. Right? Every accountant and doctor and lawyer in the Jewish people is responsible at age 20. But Levi is responsible at birth because that's what they do. It's sort of like, they tell a joke about this fellow. He tells his wife, I don't want to get up and go to shul today. I'm really sick of it. I'm going every day. I don't want to go. This guy is a pain, and this guy says stupid jokes, and this guy always takes my place, and I don't want to go today. And she says, hey, but you got to go. She says, no, I don't want to go. She says, no, you got to go. You're the rabbi. Right? So that's like a Levi. A Levi, that's his life. Right? So the Levi starts from the time they're born. While the average person, being a part of the Jewish community is an important part of your life, but it's not your life, right? It's not like you spend your entire day dealing with the Jewish community all the time. You also have a job to do, right? You're a doctor, a lawyer, work in a factory, whatever it is. While the Levi worked as a Levi. That's what they did. They worked for the community their whole life. Right? So here it starts from 30 because that's when you start, there's a certain age, the 20-year period that you worked in the temple, that you had to work in the temple. I started at 30. That was they needed a certain maturity to be able to work in the temple. And on the other hand, they had physical abilities, so at the age of 50 they had to stop. And before it and after, they were still dedicated to the Jewish people, but they were not working actively in the temple. We see, when we talked about the various tribes of Levi, within Levi, we mentioned this before, but there were three. There was Gershon, there was Kahas, and there was Merari. That is, Levi himself had 3 sons. Those were the names of the 3 sons. Each one created a tribe within the tribe of Levi. And but interestingly enough, their names, as we've mentioned before, are very odd names. Gershon, Kahas, and Merari are all names that depict the pain that the Jewish people went through in Egypt. Like Merari comes from mar, bitter, right, the bitter one. And Kahas means to strike, like you punch somebody in the teeth, which is the expression that it's coming from. So each one of them, right, has a connotation. Like Gershon is, I was a stranger, a ger, in a strange land, which the Jews were strangers in Egypt. Right? The fact is that the sons of Levi were not slaves. They were never slaves. The tribe of Levi was always excluded from slavery by the Egyptians because they were the priests. And even the Egyptians excluded their own priests from anything, so they did it with the Jews as well. So you think of all the people to be named for the bitterness of Egypt, it wouldn't be them. They're the ones who didn't have the bitterness of Egypt. Everyone around them did, but their job was to teach and to learn and to prepare people. And so the people who were the slaves would come in to see them, and they would help them, right, remain Jewish and to learn things and so forth. So you'd say of all people to name their children bitter, name the children, I'm a stranger in a strange land, you'd say it wouldn't be them. But the actual fact is that they're the most appropriate, because they named their children this because they wanted their children to understand that when our brothers are in pain, we're in pain. When one Jew is in pain, all Jews are in pain. And you don't just say, well, it didn't happen to me. The fact was, that's how it works. When people say that I was a Holocaust survivor, that they went through the Holocaust, right? And they lived. So one time I had an occasion to have a meal and next to Ed Koch, who was the mayor of New York City, right? He was a very interesting character. I mean, a real character. He was a very interesting personality. So he got up to talk and he said that I'm a survivor. Right? Ed Koch was born in America and raised in America. He's not a Holocaust survivor. But he got up and he said, I'm a Holocaust survivor. And what he explained what it meant is that he one time went to Germany after the war, and he was on a tour. And they took him to what was the office of Hitler, 50 years later, to see it. And on his desk, he had a globe. And the globe was marked with numbers on every country, and that was the number of Jews in that country. And it said that there were 3 million Jews in the United States. That's what it wrote. The number was wrong, but they even had in Albania, the country of Albania, they had 1. There was 1 Jew in Albania, and Hitler was going to get all of them. And that was his job. And Ed Koch says, I was one of those 3 million Jews in America. So the fact that he didn't get me, because he got destroyed first, makes me a survivor. I survived, right? The other people, right, he went after first. He went after us later, right? So I'm a survivor. That's the idea. As Jews, right, when one Jew's in pain, we're all in pain. So therefore they named their children, right, after the pain of their brothers, so that their own children should know how important it is to feel the pain of others. And the others should know that the tribe of Levi feels their pain. Right? That's the significance of that. Of why they do that.
I saw in today's New Jewish newspaper, in a short note there, that one Jewish woman said that intermarriage is finishing Hitler's job.
Yeah, it's a common thing that they have call it a spiritual Holocaust, right? because of it. It's a pretty strong statement to make. But basically, the end result, the Torah tells us, right? We'll get to it in about 2 months. The Torah tells us that if you allow your children to intermarry, that their children will be taken away from them. Not God cursing them. It's describing a reality. Yeah. That the children will be raised not as Jews. They will no longer be a part of the Jewish people, even if legally they're Jews. Right?
Unless a parent converts and becomes...
Right, but then they're not intermarried. But if there's an intermarriage, that's what's going to happen. Right, so that's what they're referring to. So let's move on to the next part. The next part, on 753, it says that, verse 5, it says, "Speak to the children of Israel, a man or a woman who commits any of man's sins by committing treachery towards Hashem, that person shall become guilty. They shall confess their sin." Right? And then it goes on. If a man has no kinsman to whom the debt can be returned, the returned debt is for Hashem, for the Kohen. Right? What is he talking about? Somebody goes and steals from someone else, and then that person they stole from dies. So how do you repay your debt? Because part of doing repenting for stealing is you have to pay the person back. Right? I can't go to God and say, "Forgive me for stealing," and I didn't return the money. I stole from that guy. God says, "Don't come to me. Fix it with him, then come to me." But the guy died. Right? So it's also talking about if the guy is a convert. A convert has no family. Right? They're converted. They're on their own. They're a stranger. That's why the word is used. So they're on their own. What if you steal from a convert? The convert dies. Right? Because normally if a Jew dies, they have family. They have cousins, they have brothers, they have sisters, they have parents, they have children, whatever it is, they have family. You can return the money to them because they inherit. So they get the money. But a convert, right, they could be married and have children, but let's say they didn't. They don't, by definition, have family, because when they convert, their original family is no longer considered their family, according to Jewish law. The non-Jewish family is not their family, according to Jewish law. So therefore, they can choose to let their non-Jewish family inherit their money. It's up to them. It's their money. But if they would die without a statement, then the money would go nowhere. There's nobody. It would go to God. It says to the temple. So if a person steals from the Kohen, steals from a convert, it's a terrible sin. Right? Here a person gives up everything to become a Jew. They give up everything, including their family. And then we go and disgrace ourselves by treating them badly. Right? Then it's considered a very bad sin, and Hashem takes a lot out of people for doing that. And one of the things is that you can't fix it, because there's no one to give the money to. You have to give it to God, so to speak. You give it to the temple. And that's what that's referring to. But then we have one of the most famous things. We had a few famous things in this parsha. This next one on the bottom of that page. Hashem speaks to Moshe. "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, any man whose wife shall go astray and commit treachery against him, and a man could have lain with her carnally, but it was hidden from the eyes of her husband, and she became secluded and could have been defiled, but there was no witness, and she had not been forced, and a spirit of jealousy passes over the husband, and he warns his wife." Okay, so what is this talking about? This is what's called the case of the sota. The sota is the woman who is suspected of being an adulteress. It is not a woman who is an adulteress, although that could be the end result. She's suspected. That is to say, her husband didn't walk in on her having relations with another man. What basically happens is the woman acts inappropriately. She goes like alone with another man. She doesn't necessarily do anything. Nobody sees her. But they see her, let's say, she goes to, a man comes to town and he's got a hotel room, and she goes to his hotel room. So maybe nothing happened. Maybe she's there for business, whatever it is. So she goes, right? But the husband's unhappy about it. My wife went to some guy's hotel room, right? So he says to her, "I don't want you going to that guy's hotel room." And the next day she does it again, right? So now he's jealous, he's upset. So that falls under the category of a sota. That means she didn't actually commit adultery. She's suspected of committing adultery. Right? Now, if the husband is overbearing and he's always, running after his wife, not to do everything, then that's not what we're referring to. We're talking about it's a reasonable thing, where a woman goes, right, and she inappropriately goes alone with a man in a place where there's an expectation of privacy, like his hotel room, And then her husband finds out about it and discusses it with her and says, I don't want you doing this, which you already know. A logical thing is that he doesn't want her to do it. And she does it again, and she gets caught. So now he can't say she's committing adultery, but she's not going there, for some obvious reason. There's got to be something funny going on after she's been warned not to go. So she becomes this category called a sota, a suspected adulteress. And if the husband is reasonably jealous, so then he brings, what the Torah is going to tell us here is he goes with his wife and he brings her to the Kohen, and the Kohen brings her to the temple, and there she is required to drink a liquid. We like to call it sota water, but it's not really sota water, it's just a joke. Where she takes this water and they take the name of God. The Kohen writes the name of God, a very special name of God, and then he dissolves the paper with the name on it in this water. So what he's really doing is forbidden by the Torah, which is destroying the name of God, right? You're not supposed to do that. But he does it in order to make peace between a husband and a wife, and God allows it in that case, because peace between a husband and wife is very important. So he does that, and she's required to drink it. It's a very humiliating ritual, and she's required to drink it. If it turns out that she actually committed adultery, the liquid will kill her, and it will also kill the man who had relations with her. They'll both die, but he might be who knows where. But she's there. She'll die. If it's not, she's not suspected. If she's suspected of adultery, but she doesn't do anything wrong, right? She didn't have relations, so then she gets a blessing from drinking the water because she was humiliated wrongly, even though it's not that she didn't do anything wrong. She went, and even the first time that she goes alone to the guy's hotel room is wrong. It's against Jewish law that you can't. It's just like me. When I counsel a woman in my office, I have to make sure that that there's no total expectation of privacy. In other words, that while nobody can hear us, right, I make sure nobody can hear us talking, and if the woman wants that certain people shouldn't see her come, we can do that. But when she's in my office, I don't lock the door, and I have a window in my door on purpose, because there should never be an accusation or reality that there's a temptation to do what I shouldn't do. So therefore, it's left that way. And this is the reason, not because this is going to happen, we don't do this today, but not because it shouldn't be that we're tempted, especially when you're in a situation when somebody's in pain, a woman's in pain, and she comes to me to try to help her. Right? That causes a lot of emotion in everybody. And it's definitely a high level of problems in the world when you have this scene where you have a man who's therapeutically helping a woman who's going through a difficult emotional time. They'll very often have an affection for each other, and that affection can go on to many things. So therefore, we go out of our way not to be alone. So the fact that this woman went alone with the man, not only once, but once, and then she was told not to go, and she did it again, the act itself is forbidden, right? So because of that, she was humiliated because of it, because she shouldn't do that, right? But she didn't actually sin, the actual sin. She just broke the fence around the sin. So she doesn't. So therefore, when she drinks the water, she's blessed, and that the next time she's with her husband, she'll get pregnant, she'll have a child. That's what it says. So.
But the man with whom she went out with, nothing's done to him.
If he had relations with her, he's killed.
He didn't have relations with her. So the husband says to the wife, no more. But Mrs. So-and-so says to her husband, no more. He says, who are you to tell me, the other man, that she went to a hotel room with or whatever? Nothing's done to him. And he'll go out and take out another woman.
Well, theoretically, it's not that nothing's done to him. There's no set
aspersions are cast on him.
Well, no, there are, but there's no acts that we do.
This is what I mean.
Because what happens is, let's say, if the man's single, right, he's a single man, and the woman was single, right, they shouldn't do it, but they could get married, right? If the man's married and she's single, also they shouldn't do it. But he also could marry her too, right? Torah law, you're allowed to marry more than one wife. Rabbinic law, you're not. So therefore, you can't draw a direct parallel because that law is different. However, if the woman is married, which everyone in this case is, so then he's doing something horribly wrong, even to be alone with her, just as she is. There's no set ritual for it, but no question, if he was married and he would do that, his wife would have a basis to go to the Beis Din to divorce him. Because it's sort of like one of the worst sins you can do is to destroy somebody else's marriage by having relations with their wife.
But if he won't give her a get?
Well, that's what I mean, is that the Beis Din could push for it, then that he would have to do it. The Beis Din can. There are certain things like that. A woman has grounds to go to the court and to get the court to force the man to leave his wife. Like, for instance, certain promises. If a man makes a promise to a woman, we're going to get married, we're going to move to Israel. Right? And the woman says, I only want to marry a man who's going to move to Israel. And they get married and he says, you know what, I changed my mind. I want to stay here. So that's grounds that she can go to the court and say, my husband made this promise. He then says no. She can have the court force him to divorce her. Another one is if he has a specific job, which is like a normal job, but he switches his normal job after they get married to being a tanner. Now, a tanner is a smelly job. It's a horrible job because tanning leather is very smelly. So if he changes from being, let's say, a farmer or a lawyer or whatever he is, right? Even if he makes more money as a tanner, but he becomes a tanner, he comes home. She doesn't want to go near him. He smells. He smells like dead animals, right? It's a terrible smell. So that's grounds for her to go to the court and divorce him. Right? There are times when the court will push him to do it, right? It's because there are certain things that he has a requirement to do. Right? So there are times, but I'm not saying that this is balanced. But he doesn't get off scot-free. I mean, the guy who does something wrong dies. The guy who doesn't do something wrong, there's no question that he will be ostracized. He will be treated differently. The community won't accept him. And his own wife, if he's married, his own wife can go to the Beis Din and say, look, my husband is fooling around with other women, and they can force him into divorcing her.
I mean, look at, I think in the States now, there are a couple of Rabbonim who are on a Beis Din who were trying to convince men, and were actually, I don't know whether they were beating them up or not, but they're now on charges. There was a whole thing in the paper.
Sure.
Because they were trying to convince these men, and do what you like, they wouldn't. I saw the movie Get, and that gives you I mean, in Israel, I know instances like that in South Africa too.
There's instances here. They're not as common as people want you to think, but they definitely could be, and they do happen where men abuse the system and they destroy the life of a woman. I mean, I tell people all the time, don't think that if you get divorced, you're never going to have to interact anymore with your ex, either way, husband or wife, and everything will be great. It's the worst you can do. Getting divorced from somebody means the person who knows every intimate thing about you is now your enemy, right? And not only that, is they got your children, and they will tell your children every terrible thing about you. And maybe, I'm not saying that people can't be good about it. They can be, but don't think that that if you're having a problem with your husband or you're having a problem with your wife, we'll just get divorced and everything's fine. It's not, right? I tell guys, if you think that that your wife wants you to talk to her more than you want to, you get divorced from her, you'll talk to her all the time. Because everything you want to do, you're going to have to get permission. You want to take your kids, send your kids to camp, you got to get permission. You want to not send them, you have to have permission. Everything. It doesn't get better, it gets worse, right? The divorce is a horrible thing. A woman to be in a state of divorce without a get is the worst thing. Because the husband is using this as a weapon. He's saying, just like I said, people are horrible in this way. The worst comes out about people. And the man is saying, all right, I want nothing to do with you. We'll get a civil divorce. But you want to have a Jewish divorce so you can get married again? No. Pay me. Do this, do that. Whatever it is that he wants, he demands it. The Jewish Beis Din can try to force him. They can do all kinds of things, right? But they can't. Ultimately, he has to agree. Right? That's the power a person has. He has to agree. So So traditionally, even you see in some of the writings in the Rambam and other places, that the man is basically given a choice. Like the way they write it is funny. It's like they'll say you have a man like that, and he comes before the court, and they say, well, the law says there's two ways for a woman to be free from her husband. She can give him a get, or he can die. Which would you prefer? It's a light way of saying it, but basically, traditionally in history, when Jews had the ability to set up a court system, they could execute things, they could do things, they had teeth, right? So they'd say, you know what, you either act correctly towards this woman, you take care of her, or we'll beat you up until you decide to do it, or we'll lock you in jail. And today in Israel, they'll lock people in jail for that. You have there was a guy who was in jail like 20 years, he died there. He wouldn't divorce his wife. Right? He just wouldn't do it. He said, I'd rather live in jail the rest of my life than give her freedom. He wouldn't do it. Right? It's sick. It's sick. But people are the worst they can be when they go through these things. Right? So it's abused, and the men will use it for all kinds of things sometimes. I mean, the overwhelming majority of men don't. But there are men who will say, yeah, you want a get? Then I want the kids. You want to get? I want $50,000. You want to get? And we're getting divorced, and now I can't work for your father anymore. Your father hired me when I was a young man, and I got married, and now I'm getting divorced from him. I have no job. I want to be paid off. They'll make all kinds of demands, and there's nothing she can do about it. One of the alternatives was they would hire people like this who would beat the guy until the guy said, okay, I'll do it. That's the normative way. I'm not saying that it is a good thing. It's against the law. Right? But back in the days when we had the power, that was different. We don't have the power. For 1,000 years, we didn't have the power to do such a thing. They were acting incorrectly in doing it. They were well-meaning, I hope, but they were not acting correctly. Right? Today, the base thing all we can do is ostracize you. They can say, this guy won't divorce his wife. He's not allowed to be a member of a synagogue. He can't lead services. He can't get in Aliyah. He can't participate in any activities in the synagogue. He's not counted for a minyan. So the guy comes to a synagogue for his father's yortzeit. He can't. They won't let him in. He's not. You have 10 people, including him. You don't have 10 people. Whatever it is that he wants to be a member. Anything. You can't. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to do business with him. You can't associate with him. You can't have a social interaction with him. He's basically sent away. And if he doesn't act correctly to this woman, then none of us will deal with you. Right? So it's up to you. You want to lose your business? You want to lose all your friends? You want to lose your standing in the community because you don't want to divorce your wife? Go ahead. What are we supposed to? What can we do? Right? That's how it's done. Right? So there have always been something called the aguna, the chained woman. That's always been the case. Sometimes legitimately, like the husband really does disappear. We don't know. Like they had a case in Israel where they had a submarine, right? And the submarine disappeared, and there were men on the submarine. And they didn't know, like, did the men die? Did they not die? Are they alive? Are they hiding somewhere? We don't know. So what do we do with their wives? Their wives aren't free, and they can't get a get. We don't know where he is. Can't divorce him. And their man's not, maybe he's not dead. And they had cases where they thought somebody was dead, and he shows up. And the problem is if they're young people, and she gets married again, and she has children with the second man, even though it's all well-meaning, the children are mamzers. She has 2 husbands, right? It's not everyone's well-meaning. Nobody's trying to play games, but it's a dangerous thing. Right? So in our case here, right, it's a very radical thing what they're doing. They take and this is how the ritual works. The woman is brought in front of the Kohen. Right? The first thing and there's people there. Right? People, not necessarily everybody comes, but people can come if they want. And the first thing the Kohen does is he humiliates her by uncovering her hair. Because when women cover their hair, it's not a sign of being less. It's a sign of glory. By us, it's a sign of like the queen. You ever see the queen walk around without a hat? The queen doesn't do that. Right? They dress royally, and part of it is something on your head. It's a sign of glory, sign of significance. So a Jewish woman covers her hair. So the first thing they do is they uncover her hair in front of everybody, and then they give her this barley. Barley is animal food, traditionally. Even though we eat barley, traditionally in Jewish life, if I say you have to do something with barley, I'm telling you have to do something with animal food. You have to do something with ground wheat. That's human food. it's not saying that you can't give wheat to an animal or barley to a human, but that's just a symbol. So they're basically saying you acted like an animal. What kind of a human being is prepared to have relations with any guy who walks by? Right? You're like an animal. An animal does that. So then they give her to drink. It says if she sinned and she had relations with the man, it says she has a horrible death. The expression is that like her stomach falls off. It means her womb, right, within her. The part of her body that is affected by relations, it becomes destroyed and she dies. At the same time that happens, the man who she had relations with also goes through horrible pain and dies. At the same time that happens. Now, I don't believe, and I have to look closer again, I'm just a little bit behind this week, that this ever really happened, that they actually had cases of this. But that if they did, they weren't many. They were very rare where this happened. So then what happens is if it turns out that even though the woman acted inappropriately by locking herself up with somebody, nevertheless, the husband seems to have been overly jealous. Therefore, when it turns out that she didn't do anything wrong, she receives a blessing. Right? Because she was humiliated, really, not for no reason, but the punishment was worse than the sin, so to speak. So that's what happens there. That's the story of the Sota. Right?
I want to ask two questions. One, the husband who's been humiliated, what happens to him?
Well, he's exonerated in that she's free, right?
Yes.
On the one hand, you can imagine if the woman had an affair and she dies, well, he's still, people are going to say he's a cuckold, right? You know, his wife's fooling around, but she got her poetic justice. So they're not going to, say anything about him. He sort of had justice. If she didn't, right? So then, let's say she didn't do anything wrong. So then people are either going to say that this guy's wife learned her lesson not to go away with somebody the way she did, or maybe she was well-meaning. Maybe she just wasn't real intelligent, and she went along with him because he tricked her, or because she had a job to do, and she didn't mean anything bad, but she didn't do what she should do. It wasn't right. In that case, then she's blessed. She gets a blessing, and the husband, everyone sees that his wife got blessed, and she's still alive, so the husband is also exonerated because you see that she didn't do it wrong. Right? Yeah.
What did they put in that water?
They took the name of God, they wrote on a parchment, a very specific name of God that we don't have today, and then they put it in the water, and it dissolved. Now, on parchment. Yeah, they crumbled it into dust, and then I put it in. And that's a big deal, because we're not allowed to take God's name in vain. Destroying God's name is taking his name in vain. And this was literally his name. This is the name that was so powerful, we don't have this name anymore. Right? So we don't even know it. And it says that you see how much God loves the relationship between a husband and a wife, that he wants peace between husband and wife, that he even allows his own name to be destroyed. That's what it says. You had another question?
Second question is, somebody who kind of loses their mind and ends up in a home, a young person, the man can't remarry or the woman can't remarry?
So, well, you mean if the other one's insane?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so in order to give a get or receive a get, you have to be sane. That's a rule, because if you're not sane, right, then you don't know what you're doing, right? You're not obligated to mitzvahs. However, since what happens there is, since according to the Torah, a man is allowed to marry more than one woman, right? But the rabbis have said we can't allow it. Right? And men are not on the spiritual level that they're going to act correctly. Right? They're just not going to. They're going to use this as a way of abusing women. So they stop men from doing it. But what they do is that they have a thing called the heter May Rabbanim, the permission of 100 rabbis. The guy has to have a case where his wife's insane, and he has to prove to 100 rabbis on 2 different continents that this is the case. And when he does that, then the 100 rabbis sign a paper, and he's then given permission to take a second wife. Right? Because the first wife, he's never going to see again. She's locked up somewhere, right? She's insane. So he has a second wife. He's still responsible to the first one. He still has to pay her bills. He has to take care of her. He has to mourn her when she dies.
But he doesn't divorce her.
He can't divorce her. She's not sane. So in his case, he has the ability to marry another woman. In the reverse, it's worse.
Yes, that's
the
all
reverse
I
is
know.
worse because she's not allowed more than one husband. Right? She's only allowed one. So if the husband goes insane, she's stuck. If there's a whole discussion in Jewish law that what if, which is very often the case, where someone goes insane, but they have brief moments of sanity. I mean, like you see people like they can have Alzheimer's and they don't know who you are, and then suddenly in the middle of a thing they start talking to you like
Normal.
like they're regular, right? So at that moment, according to many opinions, you're either allowed to get on his behalf because he's sane for even a minute or 20 minutes. But there's an argument about that. But it's not equal. There's no one says that these laws are equal, but there's a basis for it, right? Of why that happens. So that's one, right? So you have this story here of and it goes through the details of what I just said to you of what happens. But on the one hand, we have to understand that many times the husband was overbearing. The husband was like, there are men like this who, the woman is normal. And he's accusing her of having affairs all the time, or doing things she shouldn't do all the time, and she's not doing anything wrong.
She's innocent, probably.
Not only innocent, but she doesn't do anything wrong. Like every time she turns around, he's yelling at her. I don't want you to associate with this person. I don't want you to go here. He doesn't have the authority to do that kind of. I mean, literally he does, but not if you want to stay married. You're not going to have it. No woman is going to allow a man to tell her what to do all the time. That's not what Judaism brings up women to be like. So that's not going to happen. And because of it, then what will ultimately happen is you'll have this case of a sota, right? Because he'll be accusing his wife of everything, and then he'll look like an idiot because his wife gets blessed for this, and he's an idiot he'll learn not to act this way because you want that all the Jews should see that your wife has been accused of adultery and she didn't do anything wrong because you are overbearing, right? So the men would learn not to do that. The next case, right afterwards, on 759, we have the story of the Nazarite, right, the Nazir. It starts in chapter 6. There Hashem says to Moshe, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, a man or woman who shall disassociate himself by taking a Nazarite vow of abstinence. So what is this? So a Nazarite is a mitzvah that a man or a woman can say, I need a shock therapy. I need religious shock therapy. I'm in a rut. And in order for me to get back and inspire myself, I have to abstain from certain things, like from drinking. I have to stay away from that. I have to stay away from certain things that are going to take my mind off becoming the person I want to. So they make a commitment that I'm not going to get a haircut, I'm not going to care how I look, I'm not going to be interested in eating certain foods, I'm not going to drink alcohol, I'm staying away from all of this in order so that I should concentrate on becoming a good person. So if this happens, right, the first thing you need to know is at the end of the period, the end of 30 days when they do this, they have to offer a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is a sin sacrifice, which means that even the Torah, though the Torah says you're allowed to do this as a shock therapy, the Torah is saying, but it's not a good thing to do. Like our understanding, when we want to understand what is it to be spiritual, and I know I say this a lot, but every religion in the world tells you the same thing. If you want to be spiritual, don't get married, don't do business, go up to the mountains, right, in natural clothes, fast, and meditate, and you'll be spiritual, and you will. That'll work. You'll be spiritual, but one day you're going to need food, and you're going to have desires, and you're going to have to do business. You're going to have to buy things. You're going to need new clothes. You'll be interested in a woman, whatever it is. You have no idea what to do. You'll come down and you'll act incorrectly in every case because you didn't fix the problem. You ran away from the problem, right? That's what happens. That's what every religion so says, that you should go up, don't get married. You get married, it takes you away from spirituality, right? Intimacy does that. Money, terrible. It'll take you away from spirituality. Don't make money, right? Don't involve yourself with people. The more you are with people, the more sins you'll do. So go sit by yourself. Meditate about spirituality and you'll be holy. Right? That's what every religion in the world says. Judaism says that's not the idea. The physical world is, most of them, they all say the physical world is here to push you away from the spiritual world. Judaism says the spiritual world is here to be a tool for you to use for the spiritual world. Like, if you're going to eat, you eat according to Jewish law. Eat kosher. Don't overeat. Eat normally. Make a blessing before you eat. Use the energy from the food to do good things. Be involved. Don't separate yourself from people. Be involved with people. Help them. You have poor people, give them money. Help them get clothes. Help them do things. That's spiritual. You want to be spiritual? Get married. Make your wife happy. That's spiritual. Make your husband happy. That's spiritual. And I don't think that sitting up on a mountain all by yourself is spiritual. It does cause spirituality, but it's like my example. There are two ways to diet. You can go on a starvation diet, or you can go on a doctor's diet. If you go on a starvation diet, I promise you, you'll lose weight, and you'll lose weight fast. You cut your calories down to like, a tenth of what they are now, you will lose weight, and you will lose a lot. All these diets, Bernstein diet, they're all basically using either your body chemistry or calories, depending on which diet it is, to make you lose weight. And you lose an enormous amount of weight very fast. But then you have to eat. And you gain all the weight back because you haven't trained yourself how to act correctly, to eat correctly. Right? The other way is you go and you study nutrition and you find out how to eat correctly, and you'll also lose weight, but very slow. A pound every 2 weeks, right? But eventually you lose the weight and you'll never gain it back because you've retrained yourself. You are now going to eat correctly the rest of your life. So the first way is fast, but it won't last. The second way is slow, but it lasts. That's the difference. They say, you want to be spiritual? Don't eat. Stay away from the physical world, right? It's fine, you'll be spiritual until you got to go into the physical world, which you're going to have to do. We say, you want to be spiritual? Take the physical world and use it as a tool. Make things happen because it's a tool. That's all. It's a tool. It's not a goal, and it's not bad. Money, right? They say money. Oh no, money is the root of all evil. So make a vow of poverty. Don't have money. All right. If you don't have money, how are you going to buy a lulav? How are you going to have people to your house for Shabbos? How are you going to buy matzah? You can't. You can't do any mitzvahs without money. Can money corrupt you? 100% it can corrupt you. Money is not good or bad. Money is a tool. You use it for bad, it's bad. You use it for good, it's good. It's up to you. You have $10 in your pocket. You can give $10 to charity, or you can buy a bottle of whiskey and get drunk. It's the same $10. The $10 didn't do it, you did it. Right? So money, for us, we say money is a tool to be spiritual. It doesn't make you spiritual, it's a tool. They say money will make you non-spiritual because you will become only interested in money. Right? That's the difference in the two approaches. That's the idea of a nazir. A nazir is the Jewish way to say, I don't want money, and I don't want women, I don't want business, I'm going to sit and meditate. That's what a nazir does. And it works. But it's a sin. It's not right. You shouldn't do it, but if you need it, you can do it, right? It's like you shouldn't take certain pills, like Oxycontins. Don't take pills like that. You need it, all right, you got to take it. What are you going to do? You need it, you're in pain. But don't think that you should take it anyways, because you'll get addicted, it'll kill you. But if you use it for the right reason, it's fine. So he goes and he uses this idea of being a Nazirite, abstaining from certain foods, from drinking, from many types of things like this. He abstains, right? Then he will become spiritual. He'll shock himself. At the end of the period, like 30 days, 90 days, he offers a sacrifice, and he's no longer a Nazirite. And hopefully he's on a higher level. He can now continue along using the physical world, right? But it's not considered the right thing to do. It's considered a emergency measure, and that's what it's talking about here. It's telling you about it. And the commentaries ask, why is the story of the Nazirite immediately following the story of the suspected adulterous woman? What has one got to do with the other? Right? That they're next to each other. So Rashi is quoted by saying, the man who sees the woman in her downfall will commit to be a Nazirite. That is to say, imagine you're standing here, you're standing in the temple, right? And this woman drinks the water, and she dies in front of you. Right? That's shocking. I mean, have you ever seen anybody die a violent death in front of you? I don't mean, a family member or someone that are in a hospital bed. I mean, really, somebody gets hit by a car right in front of you, gets shot in front of you. Like, thank God, most of us haven't seen such a thing. I mean, here this guy is standing outside the temple, and this woman drinks this water, and her stomach falls off. Like, it's got to be horrible to see, right? And she dies in front of him. So now if that happens, you go become a Nazarite. Why? Because the shock of what you just experienced is telling you a message. God's saying to you, do you see what's happening? Society is allowing adultery. It's affecting the whole society. It doesn't just affect the people who do it. Like, if you have a society where pornography is everywhere, you might not care for pornography, but you're affected by it because lots of people look at it, and they expect people to, like, why is it you find that some men expect their wives to look like that? I remember a case once where I was counseling. A guy he would go and he was acting inappropriate. He would go to like nightclubs, a married man, and he'd see women there who were professionals, right? They danced. And then he would come and he wanted to divorce his wife because she didn't look like that. Right? And he was no longer attracted to her. So, the guy's an idiot. He takes a beautiful, lovely woman, and he makes her work every day to help the family. She gets pregnant, stretches her body in all kinds of crazy ways. And then he says, you don't look like these women who dance. Of course not. Right? Of course, people don't look that way. That's not normal. Normal people don't look like that, right? So that's why he corrupted himself. That's what he did, right? The society around him that he was a part of this society where men would go and look at these things. So it became normal to him. So when his wife wasn't normal, she was ugly, right? He was corrupted, not her. She was fine. He was the one who was the problem. So it says the man who goes and sees a woman die because of adultery means that the society is affected by this. If he wants to fix it, he should go and become a Nazarite, right? And he should get a shock treatment to change himself. That's the statement that it's making. But it's not saying that it's good to be a Nazarite. It's saying it's allowed to be a Nazarite for a period of time. And that's what they did. And they became a Nazarite, and then they offered this sacrifice. And so God is saying that there are certain times when separating yourself from the physical world is necessary, but it's not necessarily the way we should do it. The average person shouldn't do it. How do we do that kind of thing ourselves? When you get to a certain level, right? So you can be strict on yourself. Like, for instance, you're allowed to eat ice cream. If you wanted, you could eat ice cream all day, every day. It's kosher. Nothing wrong with it. As long as it's not a fast day, you can eat ice cream. You can have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You like whipped cream? You can eat whipped cream for every meal if you want. It's kosher. Nothing wrong with it. Right? But it'll kill you. Right? But you can eat it. Right? The idea is that if you want to, for us today, if we want to abuse the system, it's possible to abuse the system. We can be ugly, disgusting people and still keep the Torah. It's possible. You can do that. Because it's not demanding. Right? What it really demands is that you have the right frame of mind so that you keep the Torah and you allow it to raise you up. But if you're in a situation where it's not raising you up because there's something wrong with you or where you are, then the idea of a Nazarite applies. So what happens is that as we build ourselves spiritually, there are times where we'll say, I'm allowed to have ice cream. I'm allowed to. But I want to discipline myself at this certain point in my life, so I'm going to not eat ice cream for a month. Now it doesn't mean that that's how it should be. What it means is that a person is allowed to. That's a little taste of the Nazarite today. Today you can't be a Nazarite. You're not allowed to do it because you can't get out of it. You can't offer a sacrifice at the end. There's no temple. You'll be a Nazarite the rest of your life. There was one. There was a Nazarite when Israel became a state in the 1940s. There was one of the men who lived there from before then, was a great scholar, a very righteous man, and for whatever reason he felt it was necessary to become a Nazarite. But he was a Nazarite for the rest of his life. because he couldn't. There was no way to offer the sacrifice and to end it. So the rest of his life he was. Right, and he was known in Israel as the Nazir. Everyone knew. You don't have to say his name. The Nazarite. There are the Nazarites in the room, or the Nazarites in the city. Whatever it was, people knew him. So that's the Nazarite. Next thing that we have on 763 is something that you probably are accustomed to. You certainly heard, and we just did it in shul, which is the blessing of the Kohanim. On the bottom of 762 and 763, Hashem tells Moshe to tell Aaron, right, that the Kohanim have a specific mitzvah. Their job is to bless the Jewish people, right, in a very specific way, and it has the words here, right? We say this all the time. May Hashem bless you and safeguard you. May Hashem illuminate His countenance for you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift His countenance to you and establish peace for you. Right? God says that the Kohanim have this obligation, and the Kohanim would go to the temple every day, and they would do this. In Israel today, if you go and pray, like in Jerusalem, every single day, the Kohanim will go in the front, and they will do this as a part of the service. Here, we only do it on holidays. We did it on Sukkot, on Shavuos, both days of Shavuos. We do it on all of our holidays. We don't do it every day. We don't do it every Shabbat, just on holidays. But in Israel, they do it every day, right? The same, it's done every day. And the Kohanim originally did it every day. And it was a big thing to be blessed by the Kohanim, because God gave the Kohanim the ability to direct these blessings to us. So the Kohanim would do it. Now, there's many rules. One of the rules is that Kohen has to be a person who gets along with other people. He has to be a good person that people like, and he likes people. Otherwise, he's not allowed to give the blessing, because how do you bless someone you don't like? It doesn't work. You have to, and in general, we have a mitzvah that we should care for all Jews. Right? Sometimes you can't really be intimate with all Jews, like, have a strong relationship. Some people you just don't get along with, but you have to care for all Jews. So if this guy doesn't care for somebody, he's not allowed to make the blessing. The other one is that if he's in mourning, in the year of mourning, for a parent, he's not allowed to do it either, because to give a blessing to someone, you have to be happy. If you're not happy, you can't give a blessing. Now, they have an interesting question. It makes you laugh when you hear the answer. In the Code of Jewish Law, they ask a question. We have a commandment to say this blessing, right? The Kohanim are supposed to say this blessing. Whenever we have a commandment from the Torah, the rule is, if it's something that's required to be done in the daytime, we do it right away. You have a bris. When do you have a bris? Right away in the morning, right? Because it says in the 8th day, boom, 8th day is here, right away in the morning we have a bris, right? You have to shake your lulav. When do you do it? Right away in the morning. Everything is right away. You don't let mitzvahs get stale. You do them right away. But the mitzvah of the Kohanim, right, you can do it either in the morning service or the Musaf service, the second one that we do, right, in the morning. They should do it in the first one, but they do it in the second one. Right? So everyone says, why? It's supposed to be right away. Every other mitzvah is right away. Why is this one right away? So it says, because you have to be happy when you do it. So why am I any happier at the second service than the first service? Like, what's the difference? The second part of the first part. So one of the commentaries says the reason is because when you go to shul and it's getting near the end, and it's time to go home and eat or to make kiddush, it makes you happy. Everybody's happy, right? So that's when you can say the blessing for the Kohanim. If you do it earlier, everybody's grumpy because they got another 2 hours of prayers, right? So it's funny because it's pragmatic. It realizes human failures, right? What's with us? Why are we happy to pray to God? God says, I want you to pray. You should be happy. God says, I'm giving you the holiday of Sukkot. I should be happy. What do you mean? It's a pain in the neck. I got to get up early. I got to go to shul. The chazan thinks he's got a concert going on. He's here hour after hour after hour. The rabbi doesn't have a watch. He's got a calendar. He speaks for half a day. I can't handle this. Right? That's not the attitude we're supposed to have. But God realizes that's how we are, and therefore we do it at the end. So another requirement to do this, the Kohen has to be in good spirits. He has to be happy, and the people to accept the blessing have to be happy. So it's an important thing, this blessing. And this blessing is used in all different ways, but that's the original source for it, that it was used in the temple specifically at this time. Let's see if there's just any last thing. All right, so the next section, rather than going through it, is what I started with, which is why the parsha is so long. What happens here is there's 12 tribes. Each one of the tribes has to participate in the inauguration of the temple. So they had to give certain things, right? They had to give like offerings. So they gave whatever they thought was appropriate. So the first guy comes and he gives a certain number of cows, and he gives wagons, and he gives supplies. Now it's time for the second guy. So let's update this, right? You're in a shul and you got lots of people, and there's a lot of kids going to be bar mitzvah this year. So Mr. X's son is going to be bar mitzvah this week. So he says, okay, my son will be bar mitzvah. I'm going to make a kiddush for everybody. I'm not going to just give him nothing. I'm going to have chillin', and I'm going to have chili, and I'm going to have fruits and vegetables at the kiddush. It's going to be a nice kiddush. Everyone will be happy. Right? Next week's another bar mitzvah. So now the guy said, what am I going to do? I mean, I got to outdo him. So I'm going to have chicken. I'm going to offer chicken also. I'm going to have everything you have, but plus chicken. Next week's another bar mitzvah. And what am I going to do? Wait a minute. The guy last week, he offered chicken and all of the other stuff. For that, just did all the other stuff. I got to do better than that. People think I'm a cheapskate. So I got to now give turkey and chicken and everything else. Right? Well, if you have 12 bar mitzvahs in a row, by the time you get to the last one, right, you're offering like a wedding, right, and a bar mitzvah kiddush. Right? That's why? Because people are trying to outdo each other. They're trying to show off. They're trying to show how special and important they are. Well, you know what happens here? The first guy comes, he offers a certain number of oxes, a certain number of wagons, a certain amount of supplies. The second guy comes, and he has to figure out, what am I going to do? He says, I have a choice. I can up him and show everybody how great I am. And the next guy will up me until we go through all 12. And then like the 12th guy's either going to kill himself or run away, because he can't do everything, right? Or I can set a pattern. I'm going to offer the exact same thing he offered, to be able to show people, right, that we're in this together. We're not here to outdo each other, to be, what do you call it, keep up with the Joneses. We're here, right, because we're a team. So if you look, every single of the sacrifices, all 12, has a whole paragraph. The only difference in it is the name of the person giving it. They're all the same. They're exactly the same. And this is an important message that is sending to us, that sure, it's nice to get, nobody wants to have the same food every week, right? But nobody says that you have to outdo the people before you, or it's less, or you're no good, right? It's just not the case. If you really want to do the nice thing, right? You don't know what the guy after you, how much money he's got. People, like, they make weddings, they got to take a second mortgage. The rest of their life they're struggling to live because they made a wedding. Why? Because this guy made a wedding before me. How can I make a wedding less than him? Right? And that one before him, how can I make a wedding less than him? It's got to be at least as nice, and the expectations are there. That's not how it's done. You're supposed to do what you can do. Right? And that's what they were telling us here. That every one of them offered a sacrifice to God. They could have said, this is a spiritual thing. I want to have my own thing for God. I'm sorry, I'm not looking that you have to give more than me, but I don't want to give what you gave. I want to also be special for God. They said, no, we want a message to go out that everyone needs to know that you do what you can do. Don't outdo each other. We're all family. Let's get that straight. We're not here to make each other look good or bad. We're here to work together. And that's what closes the parsha. And that's the majority of the parsha, that message. And it puts so much words in there, it definitely tells us how important that is. Right? It's an important message. So we'll conclude with that, and we'll catch on next week.